The gymnasium of Brookridge High had been hastily transformed into a glittering reunion hall. Gold streamers drooped from the ceiling, and a makeshift photo booth stood crookedly near the bleachers. Balloons in school colors floated lifelessly above folding tables covered in half-hearted decorations. Former classmates milled about with drinks in hand, clutching memories they half-wished they could forget. Laughter echoed through the space, hollow and strained, as if everyone was trying a little too hard to prove that they'd turned out just fine. Some had changed, others hadn't. There were the former cheerleaders now balancing careers and toddlers. The once unnoticed debate team captain now flaunting a jawline shaped by time and money. And, of course, Chase Miller, the boy who had owned every hallway with his grin and Letterman jacket, still effortlessly magnetic, though his hairline whispered of years gone by. Then the music faltered. A murmur rippled through the crowd as headlights flared outside the gym's tall, dusty windows. A long black limousine, sleek and gleaming, rolled up to the school entrance like a phantom arriving late to its own funeral. Conversations stalled. Faces turned. Out stepped a woman in midnight black. She moved like smoke, smooth, composed, untouchable. Her heels tapped against the pavement with precision. A silver clutch hung effortlessly from one wrist, and her dark hair, pulled back into a perfect chignon, revealed striking cheekbones and a commanding gaze. But it wasn't just her appearance that stole the room's breath. It was her scent. A warm, layered aroma followed her like an aura, floral and earthy with a strange, intoxicating undertone. Every person it reached reacted the same. A pause, a blink, an involuntary breath, drawn just a little deeper than before. Some were confused, others enchanted. It felt like remembering a dream and forgetting it all at once. She stepped through the doors, and silence fell like a curtain. Then someone whispered the name as if summoning a ghost. Lena? Lena Hartman. The name hadn't been spoken aloud in years. Not without a sneer or a smirk. Back then, she had been the school's unofficial joke, the butt of cruel laughter that lingered in locker-lined hallways. "Stinky Lena," they used to chant behind her back, sometimes not even behind it. The girl who smelled like trash, who sat alone in the cafeteria, whose thrift store cardigans were the color of mildew. Rumors had run wild. That she lived in a hoarder's house, that she didn't bathe, that her parents were addicts. No one had ever asked her. No one had wanted to know. And then, one day in 8th grade, Lena had simply disappeared. No warning, no goodbye. One morning, she was at her desk, eyes downcast, wrists hidden in her sleeves. And by that afternoon, the chair was empty. And it had stayed empty. A few kids asked about her for a week or two. Most just moved on. The teachers never explained her absence. It was as though she'd been erased. But now she was here. And not just here. She was transformed. Elevated. Unreachable. The old insecurities that clung to her like dust were gone, replaced with the air of a woman who had not just survived the fire, but returned with gasoline and a lighter. Her eyes scanned the crowd, pausing just long enough to stir unease. A small smile curled on her lips, not warm, not bitter, just knowing. She made her way to the registration table, heels tapping like a clock ticking down. "Lena Hartman," she said, voice smooth as velvet and sharp as glass. The volunteer at the desk, a former classmate who used to giggle when Lena passed by, stammered. "Oh wow, you look different. I almost didn't recognize you." Lena tilted her head. "Most ghosts don't look the way you remember." As she walked into the room, perfume trailing behind her like smoke in a cathedral, no one knew what to say. Apologies tangled on tongues that had once mocked her. Some smiled nervously. A few dared to approach her, but she moved on before they got the chance. She didn't need to say anything else. Not yet. Because everyone in that gym knew exactly who she was, and not one of them was ready to face what she might have become. The perfume lingered long after Lena passed through a room, haunting the air like a melody no one could quite place. It was sweet, but not cloying, sharp yet seductive, evoking something primal in the back of the brain. And while no one dared admit it aloud, It made a few of them deeply uncomfortable. That night, the reunion rolled on like a train, with faulty brakes. Drinks were poured. Music resumed, though a few eyes kept flicking toward the woman in black, who stood like a question mark no one had the courage to answer. Lena floated through conversations, smiling politely, asking vague questions that made people shift in their shoes. Then, she did something strange. Midway through the evening, a server arrived with a silver tray carrying 8 small boxes, each one wrapped in deep violet paper with a black ribbon tied in a perfect bow. The server offered them to Lena, who took the tray herself and began distributing the gifts. "To old friends," she said sweetly, handing the first to Rachel Moore, the girl who used to tape air fresheners under Lena's desk in homeroom. Rachel blinked. "What is it?" "Just a small sample from my latest collection," Lena replied. "A fragrance designed specifically for you." Rachel hesitated, but took the box, offering a thin smile. "Thanks. That's, thoughtful." One by one, Lena handed out the boxes to select classmates. Not everyone got one, only a chosen few, the ones who used to laugh the loudest, whisper the most, throw the notes, slam the lockers. Inside each box was a single glass vial of perfume. Elegant. Minimal. The kind you'd find in luxury boutiques. Etched into each label was a different name: regret, first cut, locker room, burn, mute, rot, decay, and whisper. Yet somehow, they felt disturbingly personal. "Wear them tonight," Lena suggested, almost too casually. "They react to your body chemistry. That's where the magic happens." Rachel was the first to apply it. She sprayed the faintest mist of rot across her neck, and for a moment, nothing happened. But 10 minutes later, she was blinking too fast, sniffing the air, looking around like she'd stepped into the wrong room. "Do you smell that?" she asked, voice tight. "Smell what?" someone replied. Rachel's fingers twitched. "It's like something's rotting, like food or trash." No one else noticed it, except Lena, who offered a small, unreadable smile. Others followed. Jason Bell, who used to shove Lena into lockers, applied locker room. Within half an hour, he was drenched in sweat, despite the air conditioning. His collar stuck to his neck, and he looked around as though hunted. "I feel like I'm back in gym class," he muttered, voice trembling. "Like something's watching me. I can smell old sweat. Like the mats. Moldy floors. Why is it so strong?" The others laughed it off at first. A few thought it was a prank. Some tried to shrug off the unease. But by the end of the night, 5 of the 8 who'd worn the perfume reported strange symptoms. Smells that no one else could detect. Sudden waves of memory they couldn't place. Phantom sensations crawling over their skin. Meanwhile, Lena drifted from group to group, her presence subtle but magnetic. She asked questions that sounded harmless but carried weight. "Do you ever think about the past? Ever wonder what happened to the people you used to know? Isn't it funny how some memories just cling to you?" Chase Miller watched her from a distance. He hadn't taken a vial. She hadn't offered him one. And that, somehow, made him feel even worse. Later that night, as the reunion began to dwindle and the lights dimmed, Rachel sat alone in the hallway near the girls' bathroom, breathing heavily. She clutched her purse like a lifeline. She was crying. "It's like it's stuck to me," she whispered to no one in particular. "That smell, I can't get rid of it. It's inside me." She didn't notice Lena standing silently behind her until the woman leaned down, speaking softly near her ear. "Some things don't wash away, Rachel. You should know that better than anyone." And then she walked away, the haunting perfume still trailing behind her. Only this time, it smelled a little like vengeance. Not everyone had come to the reunion for nostalgia. Mr. Daniel Kern, once the school's soft-spoken history teacher and now retired, had arrived late, unnoticed by most. His salt and pepper beard had grown since his teaching days, and his corduroy blazer looked the same as it did 20 years ago. He hadn't been particularly popular among students or staff, but he remembered them all, especially the ones who didn't belong. The ones like Lena Hartman. He'd recognized her immediately, not because she looked the same, she didn't, but because of her eyes. They held the same quiet intensity, the same unspoken pain. But now, something else lingered behind them too. Control. The moment she entered the room, Mr. Kern knew he had made the right decision in coming. Because there had always been something strange about Lena's disappearance. Something no one questioned. Not the administration, not the teachers. It was as if a silent pact had been made to never speak of her again. But Mr. Kern remembered. He remembered the day she stopped showing up. The way Principal Adler quickly removed her name from the roster. How her locker was emptied overnight. Her records sealed. When he'd asked why, he'd been met with blank stares and clipped responses. She moved. Family emergency. Nothing to worry about. But he had worried, because Lena wasn't just bullied. She was targeted. And the way it was handled had never sat right with him. So tonight, while the others danced under the dim lights of the gym, Kern quietly slipped away down the corridor, his footsteps muffled by dusty linoleum tiles. He knew the layout by heart. The records office was still where it had always been, tucked away behind the administrative wing. No one was guarding it, of course. This was a reunion, not a crime scene. Not yet. He jiggled the handle. Locked, of course. But in his blazer pocket, he still carried the old master key he'd been given when the school closed down his department. They never asked for it back. He slid it in, turned, and the door opened with a soft click. Inside, the room smelled like old paper and forgotten secrets. Filing cabinets lined the walls, some labeled by graduation year, others by subject. He moved quickly, scanning for the 2008 to 2010 student files. There. Drawer after drawer creaked open, names flicking past like gravestones. Miller, Monroe, Patel, Sanchez. And then, nothing. No Hartman, Lena. Kern frowned. He double-checked. Searched nearby drawers. Checked the transfer files, the withdrawn student records. Nothing. No paper trail. No mention of her ever attending Brookridge High. It was as if she'd never existed. His heart started to pound. He sat down at a desk and opened his worn, leather notebook. Inside were scribbled notes from years ago, things he'd jotted down about students he worried about. Next to Lena's name. Persistent bullying. Emotional withdrawal. Request for parent meeting. Denied. He flipped through to an old post-it he'd saved. It was a copied detention notice, one he remembered clearly because it was oddly severe for a girl like Lena. She'd been given 3 days suspension for disruptive odor and failure to adhere to hygiene standards. That wasn't school policy, that wasn't even real disciplinary language. Something had been fabricated. His fingers trembled slightly as he snapped a picture with his phone, just in case. As he prepared to close the drawer, he noticed a misfiled folder sticking out from the wrong section, marked staff, not student. Curious, he opened it. It contained internal communications between the school counselor and Principal Adler from the spring of 2010. Most were routine, but one email stood out. Subject line: R.E. Hartman, situation handled body. I've removed the girl from the environment as requested. No further attention is necessary. Recommend sealing files permanently. Any inquiry should be redirected to district office. We've covered our end. There was no signature, no recipient name. Just that chilling final phrase. Kern sat in the flickering light of the old records room, pulse racing. He suddenly understood something with bone-deep clarity. Lena wasn't erased by accident. She was buried, intentionally. And now she was back. He started to stand, but a buzzing sound caught his attention. His phone lit up. Unknown number. One new text. Stop digging or you'll end up like her. His breath hitched. Slowly, he looked down the hallway. The records room door, which he was sure he'd closed, now hung slightly open. Someone had followed him. And somewhere down that dark corridor, the scent of Lena's perfume, warm, floral, and laced with something sinister, began to drift in again. By the time dessert was served at the reunion, melted cheesecake squares and stale brownies from a nearby catering service, the mood had shifted. The earlier buzz of nostalgia had curdled into something colder, quieter. Conversations became hushed, laughter forced. People kept glancing at one another, their eyes flickering with uncertainty. And always, their gaze returned to Lena. She was still drifting from group to group with that same unfaltering elegance. Perfect posture, polished words, that unreadable, polite smile. But something about her now seemed almost spectral. As if she weren't quite part of the same room she occupied. At one table, Jason Bell sat with his hands clenched into fists beneath the tablecloth. Sweat beaded along his temple, though the gym was chilly. He tugged at his collar, mumbling to himself, "I swear to God I smell it. It's like mildew. Locker room floors. That sour old sweat smell." Across from him, Marcy Langston, wearing a white blazer and too much foundation, leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Maybe it's guilt," she snapped. "You're the one who used to shove her into the bleachers." Jason turned sharply toward her. "You weren't exactly innocent. Didn't you dump that slushie on her head in 7th grade? Marcy stiffened. "That was a dare. And I apologized." "You laughed for 10 minutes. A few heads turned. Voices lowered again. Meanwhile, Rachel Moore was in the bathroom, hunched over the sink, frantically scrubbing her wrists. The scent of rot, the perfume Lena had gifted her, clung to her skin with unrelenting persistence. She'd washed 4 times, twice with soap, once with sanitizer, once with lemon juice. She'd begged from the bar. Still, it lingered, faint but unmistakable. Like the underside of garbage lids and rotting lettuce, it made her want to scream. She stared at her reflection in the mirror, her mascara slightly smudged, her lipstick faded. A younger version of herself seemed to peer back, one with braces and glossy lips, the same girl who used to hold her nose and mock Lena in gym class. And suddenly, for a moment, she could see it. A flash of memory she didn't remember having. Lena, alone in the locker room, clutching a shirt, her fingers trembling, her eyes red. Something wet on the fabric. Something wrong. Rachel stumbled back from the sink. Outside the bathroom, Lena was standing beside the punch table, quietly observing the room. She wasn't mingling anymore. She didn't need to. The damage was already taking root. She watched as Chase Miller walked by, then paused. He hadn't received a perfume vial, and he hadn't spoken to her yet. He'd watched from a distance all night, his confidence eroding, piece by piece. He finally approached her, one hand jammed into his pocket. "Hey," he said, "can we talk?" Lena turned, meeting his gaze with a calm that chilled him. "You didn't get a perfume," she said instead of answering. "I noticed," Chase replied, trying to smile. "Is that a punishment? Or a reward?" She tilted her head, as if truly considering the question. "Neither. It just wasn't for you." Chase looked around. "People are acting weird, sweating, freaking out. Is this some kind of revenge plan?" Lena's smile didn't waver. "Is that what you'd do, Chase, if they had done it to you?" He didn't answer. Before he could speak again, someone cried out near the dessert table. Marcy Langston had collapsed into a chair, hyperventilating. She was gripping her throat, muttering, "The bugs. There are bugs in my mouth." People rushed to her side. Someone yelled to call 911. A few attendees began frantically scrubbing their wrists, or pulling out tissues, wiping their necks where the perfumes had touched. And still Lena stood there, composed, motionless. Someone shouted across the room, "What did you give us?" Lena slowly turned toward the voice. "Scent," she said, her voice like soft silk. "Nothing more. Scent unlocks memory. Memory triggers emotion. And emotion, when buried too long, festers. The room fell into stunned silence. Mr. Daniel Kern watched it unfold from the back of the room, his brow furrowed. He hadn't received a perfume vial either. But what disturbed him wasn't what he saw. It was what he remembered. There was something familiar about the symptoms. Hallucinations, panic, fear. And the emails in the records room came rushing back to him. Removed from the environment, sealed permanently. This was no mere perfume. It was a key. And Lena was unlocking doors they had all slammed shut a long time ago. Chase Miller couldn't sleep after the reunion. It wasn't just the drama. Rachel's breakdown, Marcy's hallucinations, the suffocating tension that had poisoned the air like a chemical spill. It was the way Lena had looked at him. Not angry, not vengeful, but knowing. She had seen him, all of him, even the parts he'd buried. And for the first time in years, he felt like he was 17 again. Helpless, unsure, and too much of a coward to speak up. He spent the next morning scrolling through old yearbooks, pulling up names, faces, incidents, everything he had tried to forget. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Text message. Meet me at the old gym. Alone. 5 p.m. You owe me that much. L. Chase stared at the message, his heart thudding. He didn't text back. At 5:02, he stepped into the gym. The space was eerily silent, stripped of its party decorations. Sunlight bled through the high windows, dust swirling in the air like suspended ash. Lena was already there. She stood at the center of the gym, facing the old championship banners as though they were sacred texts. Her heels echoed against the polished floor as she turned to him. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't either." They stood apart, him in faded jeans and a hoodie, her in a tailored black coat, every inch deliberate. She looked like someone who belonged in a boardroom, not this crumbling gym. Yet somehow, this was her arena now. "I didn't say anything back then," Chase said, cutting straight to the guilt. "When they bullied you, when they laughed, I saw it all, I heard it. And I didn't stop it." "No," Lena said softly, "you didn't." "I was scared. I didn't want to be next." "That's not an excuse, I just—" He trailed off, not sure what he was asking for. Forgiveness? Maybe just to be seen as more than who he used to be. Lena walked slowly toward him, her eyes unreadable. "I don't need your apology, Chase," she said. "But I do need your memory." Chase frowned. "What do you mean?" She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small, grainy still image, an old-school security camera freeze frame. It showed a blurry hallway, a figure crouched near a locker. Chase leaned in, squinting. "That's the girls' locker room," he muttered. "I remember that corner." The image was dated April 17, 2010. "I found this after I reacquired access to certain archived files," Lena said. "Someone was tampering with my things, pouring something into my gym bag, every week." Chase's throat went dry. "Who is it?" Lena's voice turned cold. "That's what I'm asking you." He stared harder. The figure wore a jacket, gray, with elbow patches. Familiar. The posture, too. Slightly hunched. And then it clicked. His stomach dropped. That's Mr. Caulfield, the counselor." Lena nodded slowly. "The one who called me in every week for check-ins. Who told me I was overreacting. That I needed to control my body odor. That hygiene was a, quote, social responsibility." She paused. "He made me believe I was the problem." Chase felt like the floor had shifted beneath him. "But why would he do that?" he whispered. "That's insane." Lena's eyes glittered with something sharp. He wasn't acting alone. There were whispers. "Someone wanted me out. Someone higher." Chase looked down at the photo again. "Do you have the footage?" "No. Just this still. The rest has been wiped. Sloppy job, though. The system didn't fully delete its indexes." Chase felt bile rise in his throat. Jesus. They stood in silence for a moment, the truth slowly sinking in like poison. Then Lena added more quietly, "He used to tell me no one would believe me, that even if I screamed, they'd just say I was making it up to get attention. And he was right. No one did." Chase felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. Heavy. Deserved. "I believe you now," he said, and meant it. Lena stepped closer, so close he could smell her perfume again. This time soft, less overwhelming. "Good," she murmured, "because belief is just the beginning." She handed him a flash drive. "What's this?" "Everything I found. Emails, reports, blacked out files. I need someone on the inside. Someone they'll trust." "You think they still trust me?" Lena's smile returned, just faintly. "They don't know you remember." The news spread like wildfire. Lena Hartman had died years ago. The quiet girl who vanished in 8th grade had never returned. The woman who had taken the school by storm that night was an imposter. That's what some whispered behind closed doors. Some said it outright. At first, the claim sounded like desperate gossip, grasping at shadows to explain the impossible transformation. But when a former classmate, Ethan Price, grew suspicious enough to dig deeper, his discoveries sent tremors through the group. It started with a simple question. Where had Lena been all these years? No one had heard from the family. No public records. No social media footprints matching the woman at the reunion. Ethan, a quiet journalist who'd spent years chasing small-town stories, requested a DNA test through a private lab, just to settle the speculation once and for all. When the results came back, they shocked everyone. The DNA sample from the reunion's Lena Hartman did not match any of the old-school records for Lena Hartman. The woman who walked among them, commanding the room with icy grace, wasn't Lena at all. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs into accusations. Who was she, and why had she come? Meanwhile, inside the hotel where many of the reunion guests stayed, a shadow moved unseen. The woman, in her luxurious black coat, sat alone in her suite, peeling off a thin, translucent layer from her neck, a silicone scar, perfectly crafted to hide an old wound. Underneath, her skin was flawless, almost porcelain. Only one piece was left to remove. Her voice was low and steady as she murmured to herself, "One more mask." Outside, the night pressed against the windows like a living thing, thick and expectant. A knock at the door startled her. Without looking up, she called, "Come in!" The door creaked open, revealing a tall figure silhouetted in the dim hallway light. "It's time," said a familiar voice. The woman finally met the gaze of the visitor, her cousin Miriam. Miriam's eyes were cold, but filled with something else, a fierce determination. "You can't keep hiding forever." "I don't want to hide," the woman replied, slipping the final mask from her face to reveal a striking, unfamiliar visage. Sharp jawline, piercing eyes that burned with a fire no one had seen before. "I want justice," Miriam nodded. "Then you have to finish what you started." The reunion was only the beginning. "Good," the woman said, "because the real Lena Hartman, she's still out there, and she's watching." The reunion had transformed from a celebration into a battlefield. The air was thick with accusations, broken trust, and fragile alliances. The former classmates, once united by shared history, now circled each other like wary predators, eyes darting for any sign of weakness. It was Rachel Moore who broke the silence. She stood abruptly in the center of the room, her hands trembling, eyes glassy from tears and desperation. "I can't take this anymore," she said, voice cracking. "We all need to admit the truth. We're not innocent." Murmurs rippled through the group. Some glanced away, others leaned in, curious and wary. Rachel took a shaky breath. Back in middle school, it wasn't just us kids. There were adults. People who wanted Lena gone. They paid some of us to make her life unbearable. Gasps and whispered protests echoed. Jason Bell, his jaw clenched, stepped forward. You expect us to believe we were hired to bully a girl? That we were puppets? Rachel's eyes burned. Yes. Me, Marcy Langston, and one other. We were given money, told to humiliate Lena so she'd leave. We didn't know who was behind it. We didn't ask. Marcy, looking pale and fragile, nodded slowly from the corner. It was terrifying. We didn't want to do it, but the threats, the warnings. They said if we stopped, worse things would happen to us. A heavy silence fell. Daniel Kern, standing near the back, stepped forward, voice grave. This explains why the school administration covered it up, why the files disappeared. Suddenly, the room felt smaller, suffocating. Rachel wiped her eyes. I have proof. She pulled out a folded letter from her purse. The edges were worn, stained with time. This arrived a week before Lena disappeared. She unfolded the letter carefully and read aloud. Your debts have come due. We don't forget those who disobey. You know what's at stake. L. The letter was unsigned, but the handwriting was unmistakable to those who had seen the reunion guests' notes and speeches that night. Gasps turned to frantic whispers. Jason's hands shook as he took the letter, reading it with mounting dread. Who is L? He asked, voice barely audible. Rachel's gaze hardened. I don't know. But I think she's here, watching us. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A cold draft swept through the room, raising goosebumps on every exposed arm. Marcy's voice was barely a whisper. She's punishing us. One by one? Then, just as the tension reached a fever pitch, a scream pierced the air. Everyone spun toward the source. Zachary Myers, the once quiet boy turned troubled adult, was missing. His chair sat empty at the corner table. Panic erupted. Where is he? Chase demanded. Rachel backed away, eyes wide. He was just here. Daniel Kern pushed through the crowd, voice booming. Calm down! We need to search the building! The reunion quickly descended into chaos. Phones were out, calls made, flashlights grabbed. But as minutes stretched into an hour, no sign of Zachary was found. Then, from the shadows near the exit, a chilling whisper floated through the air. Stay, or the next one will be you. The storm outside had been gathering all night, thunder rolling low and steady like the ominous heartbeat of the reunion itself. Rain lashed against the windows of the old-school gymnasium, the wind howling through cracks in the weathered walls, as if nature itself was echoing the tension trapped inside. Inside, the room was thick with dread and whispered confessions. The fragmented group of former classmates huddled together, eyes darting nervously toward the entrance, which had remained shut since the mysterious disappearance of Zachary Myers just hours before. Lena Hartman, or the woman claiming her name, stood at the center, her silhouette framed by flashes of lightning that briefly illuminated her face. She was no longer just a woman cloaked in elegance and mystery. She had become something far more dangerous, a storm of secrets and vengeance wrapped in human form. The others watched her warily, unsure whether she was predator or prey. Suddenly, the heavy door creaked open. Every breath caught in the room, all eyes turned. Standing in the doorway was the real Lena Hartman. Her clothes were simple and worn, her hair tangled and damp from the rain, but her eyes burned with a fierce, unyielding fire. This was no broken girl from the past. This was a survivor, one who had endured far more than anyone had ever imagined. The imposter took a step back, her composure flickering for the first time. So, the real Lounge said, her voice calm but cutting through the silence like a knife. You thought you could wear my face and rewrite my story? Murmurs rippled through the crowd, questions hung heavy in the air, the imposter's lips pressed into a thin line. I'm the one who came back to finish what was started. You've been hiding. No, the real Lena replied steadily. I was trapped, locked away in a place you couldn't see. They called me crazy, said it was all in my head. But I never stopped fighting. She stepped fully into the room, the rain dripping from her coat onto the polished floor. The reunion guests could feel the shift. A reckoning had arrived. Miriam, the impostor's cousin, stepped forward. "This ends tonight. The truth comes out. The lies unravel. And justice finally prevails." A tense silence settled. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, the real Lena spoke again. "They wanted me gone because I knew too much. The school, the counselor, even some of you, there were secrets worth killing for." Eyes widened. Some looked away. Others exchanged guilty glances. "And the woman who wore my face, she's here because she wanted revenge. But revenge without truth is just another mask." The impostor's expression cracked. "You don't know what I've suffered." "I do," said the real Lena. "But this is your last mask. It's time to take it off." Slowly, the impostor reached up and peeled away the silicone layer covering her face, revealing the real identity beneath. The room gasped. It was not the real Lena, nor was it the timid girl from the past. It was someone else entirely. Someone with a history intertwined with the darkness that had haunted their school for years. Before anyone could speak, the lights flickered and went out. Panic surged. In the sudden blackness, a single gunshot rang out. When the lights returned, Miriam lay on the floor, clutching her side, blood seeping through her fingers. The room erupted into chaos. The real Lena dropped to her knees beside Miriam. "Stay with me," she pleaded. All eyes darted toward the door, now wide open. Someone was gone. The final mask had fallen. But the true nightmare was just beginning.